Hey there, Jody here, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'll be giving a spoiler-free review on the latest book that I've read. So I'll talk a little bit on what the book is about, if I've read from this author before or not, share my thoughts on the book, my star rating, as well as is this a book I would recommend. So without any further ado, let's get on to today's spoiler-free book review, and that would be for the book Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi. So Emergency Contact is about Penny and Sam. Penny has just arrived at the University of Texas to attend her first year of college. Sam manages a coffee shop. The two end up becoming one another's emergency contact thanks to a random chance encounter. From there, Penny and Sam end up talking to one another any chance they can get through text messages, and soon both come to realize how much they enjoy talking to one another and being in each other's company, even if that company with one another is only through their phones. This is the first book by Mary H.K. Choi that I've read, but it certainly won't be the last. Mary H.K. Choi is definitely for sure a new favorite author of mine now. I believe this author as of now has written a total of 3 books, all young adult novels. Emergency Contact is the first book that they wrote, and then after that they wrote the books Permanent Record and Yoke. And in the back of Emergency Contact, the first chapter of Permanent Record is included. I read it and I really liked it. And so despite actually having the book Yoke at the moment and not Permanent Record is still the next book by this author that I would want to read. So hopefully at some point I get around to getting that book so I can read it. So now for my thoughts on the book. Overall, I really love this book. You know, there was one thing about this book that I didn't love so much. So first I'll talk on what I liked about the book, and then after that I'll get to what I didn't like about the book. So now for what I liked about the book. One of the things I really liked about this book was the writing. Mary H.K. Choi is just a brilliant writer. I absolutely love this author's writing style. The writing in this book was smart, thoughtful, and sincere. Throughout the story, the tone of the writing would go back and forth between being fun and witty to being deeply profound and emotional. There was this perfect balance in the writing, with telling a story that was light and fun, with also telling a story that was sad, heavy, and difficult. The writing in this book is what made this book so good. The writing elevated the story to another level, making it more than just your typical YA romance and coming of age kind of story in a book. The writing had an immense amount of heart in it, and you could tell when reading the book that it was written with a lot of thought behind it, love, and care. This book was one that kept you wanting to turn the read next page. This was a book that you didn't want to put down. This was a book that kept you wanting to see where the story was going to go, and a big reason for that was because of the writing in the book. Another thing I really liked about this book were the characters. The author did an absolutely amazing job with the characters in this book, especially with the characters of Penny and Sam, our 2 main characters. Penny and Sam were kind, considerate, never judged one another, and were really, really there for each other whenever the other person needs someone to talk to. Throughout their time texting back and forth, Penny and Sam formed a real bond, a real connection with one another that was just so lovely and so special to get to see take shape as it was happening. It's not every book you read that you find yourself being able to relate to or being able to connect to the characters in a story in one way or another on some kind of level. Penny and Sam, though, were both characters that I found myself really being able to connect to in one way or another. There was a moment in the book, one moment in particular, that I found myself very much connecting to Penny's character. That moment is when Penny asked Jude and Mallory, 2 of her new college friends, why they liked her because she didn't understand why anyone would like her or want to be her friend. And reading this, my heart broke because I just so understand and know what it feels like to feel that way about yourself. When Penny asked that question, it was emotional for me to read. I don't often get emotional when reading a book, but because I was so able to relate to that moment, I did find myself, tearing up a bit. And I myself might not have been able to find others in my life to be friends with who didn't make me feel the need to ask that question that Penny asked in the book. But I was happy for Penny in the moment after that moment because you could tell she was in a process of making friends who would never make her feel the need to ask questions like that about herself ever again. The last thing I liked about this book was the story, which in this book is essentially the relationship between Penny and Sam. The story in the book really emphasized how important it is and how special it is to have someone in your life who truly cares about you, to have someone in your life who truly appreciates you, and to have someone in your life who truly understands and gets you. Penny and Sam had both been through things in their lives before they met that made them feel as though they were alone when they weren't. Even though they did have others in their life, they never had anyone in their lives before meeting who didn't let them down in some kind of way. Both had a hard time giving others a chance fully. Both had difficulty opening up and trusting others because they assumed that if they did, they would ultimately just be let down in the end. Both really understood and knew what it felt like to feel that way. Penny and Sam meeting felt like fate, like they were meant to find one another, meant to be in each other's lives. In many ways, Penny and Sam were drifting in the world, and when they found one another, it was as though they found their anchor, someone who wouldn't fade or drift away out of their lives, someone who they could count on 100%, no question about it, to always be there for them, to always care about them, and to never let them down, finding a real and genuine friend in each other for life. Penny and Sam had just such a beautiful and special relationship in this book. They didn't have to be anything or anyone other than who they were with one another. They didn't have to try and pretend that they had their lives together or that they had everything figured out. They didn't have to pretend they were okay when they weren't. They could be vulnerable with one another, where they could talk about their insecurities, could be their awkward selves, without there being any fear that the other person would laugh or think any less of them. But instead they would see in each other how brave the other person was, to have the courage to talk about what they've been through, what they're going through, and what they're feeling. So those are my thoughts on the book as far as what I liked about the book. Now for what I didn't like about the book. So there was only one thing about this book that I didn't care for, which was that I felt it did take too long for Penny and Sam's emergency contact moment to happen. In the book, that moment doesn't happen until just before page 100. Throughout the whole story, we get to hear from both the perspectives of Penny and Sam, and in the time before the two become one another's emergency contact, we get to learn who Penny and Sam are individually. And while the first almost 100 pages in the book were good, I did think the story did get much better once Penny and Sam's relationship began. So those are my thoughts on the book, both the good and the bad. And so now for my star rating. Emergency Contact is a book that I would now consider to be both my favorite as well as the best YA book now that I've ever read. Sure, I didn't love absolutely every single thing about the book, such as how I did think it did take too long, like I just previously mentioned, for Penny and Sam's emergency contact moment in the book to occur, which is the moment in the story that ultimately does drive the story forward. Regardless of that, I just still loved and thoroughly enjoyed my time reading this book. I absolutely love the characters and the story that they told. And so with all that being said, I easily gave this book 5 stars. Now for is this a book I would recommend? This recommendation is one that I will be splitting up into 2 parts. Part 1. So as you can tell by my review, I love this book a lot. The writing was great, the characters were kind and relatable to where you could connect with them in one way or another. The story was heartwarming, sweet, and kept your attention. I honestly think anyone who reads this book would like it, and so I would say if you're looking for an exceptionally good YA book to read, I highly recommend Emergency Contact. Now for part 2. With all that being said, I can see someone who is reading this book getting to a point of frustration, waiting for the moment in the story for the story to actually begin. This is definitely a great book, a book worth reading, and a book worth your time. A little patience, though, I would say, is required with this book, as you do have to wait around a bit for the purpose of the story to actually begin. Once that moment arrives, though, the story does very much go from being good to being great in an instant. So, once again, with all that being said, I would say if you're not interested in waiting around almost 100 pages for a book story to start, then I say sadly to just skip reading this book, which very much pains me to say because I absolutely love this book. So yeah, that's going to be it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching my spoiler-free review of Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi. I hope to help you discover a new book today along the way as well, and until next time, bye.